For more at the summit at The Hague, we're joined by Joseph Costa. He's from the Truman National Security Project and is a nuclear nonproliferation expert. Thanks so much for joining us. Let me start with Crimea, because that's not your area of expertise, but it's got to be bothersome to you that it just completely knocked the other stuff off the grid. Seems like everybody's focused on Ukraine. How tough is that in terms of a setback for people who are really particularly interested in this subject matter like you?
Well, I think some of the good news stories still coming out. Today in the news, it was announced that Japan is giving up over 1,000 pounds of its highly enriched uranium and plutonium combined to the United States. And a lot of times for this summit, the results that are coming out of it were already predetermined before you went into it. So I think you'll still see lots of good news coming out. What I'm much more concerned about is how this may impact U.S.-Russia bilateral relations in terms of nuclear security, and also in the multilateral framework, whether it's through G8 or other partnerships, where Russia is really a critical partner on these issues. And this could perhaps slow down some very important counter-proliferation efforts.
Well, talk to me a little bit more about that. And also, Russia is involved. I mean, when we start thinking about Iran, obviously they're a key player there as well.
Yeah, that's correct. So the most famous counterproliferation program between the U.S. and Russia is the Nunluga program. Started in the early 90s, and it lasts of June of 2013. Since then, we've been working on a follow-up agreement, and this really addressed some very important aspects in terms of helping to bring down nuclear warheads in Russia, intercontinental ballistic missiles, etc. We've been in active negotiations with Russia to attempt to have a follow-on agreement. And we're in a stall phase before Ukraine. What I'm afraid now is that those negotiations starting again will actually be significantly delayed. And that's really going to hurt some very positive efforts to try and go after Russia's massive quantities, and in fact, the world's largest quantities of nuclear weapons usable material in the world.
I was USA Today back 2000, 2003, and I remember we did a story on Ukraine and their efforts working with the U.S. in dismantling their nuclear warheads. And now there are some who say, geez, maybe they shouldn't have done that. Are you afraid the events that we've seen in the last couple of weeks might have some countries that might have been thinking, perhaps we need to get rid of these stockpiles, now thinking, well, wait, maybe not?
I think that's a very good question, and that's exactly right, because you give states a reason to have a nuclear deterrent when they feel as if they're not protected or they feel defenseless. And yes, there is absolutely the risk that other countries such as Iran can look at this and say, this is why I need the ultimate deterrent. This is why it's so important for the international community to come down on the side of international law and show states that, one, we will work together for each other's united security. It's why it's important the United States is taking such a strong position that it is, because the United States security guarantee is critical in a situation like this.
U.S. President Obama made a speech back in Prague in 2009 when he was talking at great length about this subject. And I lifted a quote from the speech, and I wanted to share it with you and get your thoughts on it. He said, "Today the Cold War has disappeared, but thousands of those weapons have not. In a strange turn of history, the threat of global nuclear war has gone down, but the risk of a nuclear attack has gone up." How much have things changed since 2009? Is the landscape better now, or is it still a major issue as he described then?
Well, it's better in the fact that we no longer face the risk of nuclear catastrophe as we did in the heart of the Cold War. It's very unlikely that the U.S. and Russia will engage in a war of mutually assured destruction. However, the risk of nuclear terrorism, of a lone actor, or of a state like North Korea using a nuclear weapon or a nuclear device to kill tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of people, is still very much a threat. One of the great things about this nuclear security summit is we really have made some great gains since 2009. We're down to 13 countries now have eliminated their highly enriched uranium and plutonium stocks. Only 25 countries in the world right now have this material. That's significantly lower than what we had only 5 years ago today.
And I want to lift one more quote from that speech, because I want to get your thoughts on this too. He said, "As the only nuclear power to have used a nuclear weapon, the United States has a moral responsibility to act. We cannot succeed in this endeavor alone, but we can lead it. We can start it." Has the president done enough in terms of leading and starting this movement, do you think?
Absolutely. And I think this is the Global Nuclear Security Summit, and what we've been able to achieve in terms of nuclear weapons is going to be probably the #1 nuclear security, effort that the administration has achieved unless an agreement with Iran is made. We have made significant grounds in terms of raising what was a niche issue among experts, nuclear security, to the level of presidents and prime ministers, where we have countries actually working together in a cooperative manner to try and prevent the risk of nuclear terrorism. Before 2009, this didn't exist. So the goal is, the real question is, what happens in 2016 when the Obama administration, when this moves on forward after the last summit? What I hope is that there's another mechanism or institutional framework by which these efforts continue. So you have countries like Pakistan that are nuclear non-proliferation. They haven't signed on to the treaty. Now they're part of a formal international framework by which we can discuss the nuclear security of their materials. We need such an institution like this to continue to go forward.
Okay, you brought up Iran, so I can't let you go without asking you about that. What are your thoughts on that? Is a deal going to get done?
The effort with Ukraine has really made things very problematic, unquestionably. And I think Iran really walks away a winner in this situation because events in Ukraine have overmasked it. We need Russian cooperation to work with the United States to bring Iran to the table. So I think right now they feel as if they're in a position where they can probably sit it out a little bit, continue on with negotiations. But I think this will only add to the complexity of what was already a hard, long conversation.
All right, Joseph Costa, always a delight talking to you. Thanks so much for coming in.